We, the jury impaneled and sworn in the above entitled cause, do upon our oaths find as follows. Defendant is guilty of the crime of sexual battery and set punishment at 8 years.
How scary it is when you realize that the people who swore to protect you can be the same people who hurt you. Corrupt cops are some of the things that are wrong with the world. It surprises them most when they face the full wrath of the law and receive life sentences. In this video, I'll show you how they respond to the new reality. Daniel Holtzclaw. The case of former Oklahoma City police officer Daniel Holtzclaw is a mouthful in more ways than one, and this even shows in the sheer number of charges against him during his trial. After being arrested on August 21, 2014, Holtzclaw eventually faced 36 charges of sexually violating 13 women while on duty, with offenses ranging from first-degree rape to forcible oral sodomy. Prior to the accusations, Daniel Holtzclaw was a promising young man who graduated from Eastern Michigan University in 2010 with a degree in criminal justice to follow in his father, Lieutenant Eric's footsteps, and become an officer of the law. He began his career as a patrol officer, upholding the law and ensuring the safety of the citizens, or at least that was what the unsuspecting people of Oklahoma believed until one of his victims came forward with a police report against him. Janie Ligens, a 57-year-old African-American woman, reported that Holtzclaw had pulled her over around 2 a.m. on June 18, 2014, and made her lift her shirt and pull down her pants before forcing her to perform oral sex on him. This report kick-started the sexual harassment investigations with a 2-hour-long interrogation during which Daniel Holtzclaw denied ever assaulting Ligens, or anybody else for that matter. As detectives Kim Davis and Rocky Gregory from the Oklahoma City Police Department's Sex Crimes Unit dug deeper, they discovered a pattern of abuse and assault that spanned several months. They found additional victims, all African-American women, who had been targeted by Holtzclaw. They began picking up his trail from the report of a woman who claimed in May 2014 that an officer stopped her and drove her to a secluded area before he forced her to perform oral sex. The route shown by the woman matched Holtzclaw's GPS route that evening. The detectives continued sniffing around and had a dozen more victims turn up with similar stories of traffic checks turning into events of sexual harassment. These women were all African American, ranging in age from 17 to 57, mostly from a poor region of Oklahoma and having outstanding warrants or criminal records. Holtzclaw was arrested 2 months later and was charged with 16 and eventually 36 counts of sexual offenses, including first and second-degree rape, sexual battery, procuring lewd exhibition, stalking, and forcible oral sodomy. His trial began on November 2, 2015, and he pleaded not guilty to all 36 charges. Prosecutors proceeded to provide DNA evidence to back their claims and accusations, as skin cells matching one of the victims were found in his uniform pants close to his zipper. The surveillance footage presented during the trial further corroborated the victims' testimonies. The videos showed Holtzclaw making unscheduled stops, deviating from his assigned duties, and targeting specific individuals. These actions were in direct violation of his responsibilities as a police officer. On December 10, 2015, Holtzclaw was convicted on 18 of the 36 charges and sentenced to 263 years in prison. While his sentence was being read out, Holtzclaw was seen bowing his head and crying, although it is unknown if the tears were of remorse or just for the loss of his freedom. He appeared to be muttering the words, "I didn't do it," under his breath while being escorted from his seat. Derek Chauvin. Derek Chauvin does not require a lot of introduction. Chauvin is the former police officer charged and sentenced for the death of George Floyd. It all began on May 25, 2020, when a video surfaced showing Chauvin kneeling on the neck of George Floyd, an unarmed black man, for over 9 minutes during an arrest. The video quickly went viral, sparking outrage and protests across the United States and worldwide. The incident ignited a national conversation about police brutality and systemic racism, with demands for justice echoing through the streets. As the world watched in horror, Chauvin was swiftly fired from the Minneapolis Police Department and charged with second-degree unintentional murder, second-degree manslaughter, and third-degree murder. The trial, which took place in the spring of 2021, was closely followed by millions of people as it became a symbol of the fight for justice and accountability. The prosecution presented a compelling case, highlighting the excessive and unnecessary force used by Chauvin, while the defense argued that Floyd's death was a result of underlying health conditions and drug use. After weeks of gripping testimony from witnesses, medical experts, and emotional accounts from George Floyd's loved ones, the jury reached a verdict on April 20, 2021. Derek Chauvin was found guilty on all charges, marking a significant moment in the history of police accountability. The sentencing hearing, which took place several weeks later, was a highly anticipated event. It was an opportunity for the judge to consider the severity of Chauvin's actions and determine an appropriate punishment. The courtroom was filled with tension and anticipation as the world waited to see how Chauvin would react to the consequences consequences of his actions. On the day of the sentencing, Chauvin was given a 270-month-long, 22-and-a-half-year-long sentence. As the sentencing hearing began, the atmosphere in the courtroom was palpable. Derek Chauvin, dressed in a suit, sat quietly at the defense table, his eyes fixed on the judge. The weight of the moment seemed to hang heavily upon him. As the judge read out the sentence, Chauvin's expression remained stoic, but a flicker of emotion could be seen in his eyes. The reality of spending over 2 decades behind bars for his role in George Floyd's death was finally sinking in. The gravity of his actions and the impact they had on Floyd's family and the community were becoming undeniable. Tears seemed to well up in Chauvin's eyes as he listened to the judge's words. It was a brief display of vulnerability from a man who had shown little remorse throughout the trial. Chauvin's reaction was contrasting to his demeanor during the trial, where he appeared detached and unaffected by the emotional testimonies and evidence presented against him. But now, faced with the reality of his punishment, the weight of his actions seemed to bear down on him. Throughout the trials and sentencing hearing, Chauvin's emotions were difficult to read as he donned a face mask as per COVID-19 regulations. Michael Dautro, a former Edison cop, has been sentenced to 20 years in prison for orchestrating a series of retaliation plots against those who crossed him, including fellow officers. In a shocking turn of events, Dautro firebombed his supervisor's home, leading to his conviction and subsequent sentencing. The sentencing, which took place in New Brunswick, was presided over by Superior Court Judge Pedro Jimenez, who described Dautro's time as a police officer as a complete fraud. It all began in the quiet town of Edison, where Michael Dautro served as a police officer for a decade. But behind the badge, Dautro harbored a deep-seated anger and a thirst for revenge against those who crossed him, even his fellow officers. Dautro's reign of terror came to a head when he orchestrated a series of retaliation plots, culminating in a shocking act of violence. He firebombed his supervisor's home, leaving the community in fear and his victims scrambling to save their lives. The night of May 2013 will forever be etched in the memories of the Anderko family. As they slept peacefully in their home, Dautro approached under the cover of darkness, armed with a deadly weapon. Igniting the firebomb, he unleashed a wave of terror upon the unsuspecting family. 5 Anderkos, including Deputy Chief Mark Anderko himself, were forced to flee for their lives as flames engulfed their home. The sheer depravity of Dautro's actions sent shockwaves through the community, leaving them questioning how someone sworn to protect and serve could commit such a heinous act. Assistant Prosecutor Russell Curley described Dautro's actions as vengeful and lacking any semblance of remorse. Dautro's lack of empathy for the lives he put at risk was staggering, and Curley argued that the full weight of the law should be brought down upon him. Presiding over the case, Superior Court Judge Pedro Jimenez echoed Curley's sentiments. He labeled Dautro's actions as depraved and emphasized that this was not a spur-of-the-moment decision. Dautro had carefully planned and executed the firebombing, fully aware that innocent lives were at stake. Throughout the trial, Dautro's defense team attempted to paint him as a victim of circumstance, claiming that he had been coerced into committing the crimes by his fellow officers, but the evidence told a different story, one of a man consumed by a thirst for revenge and willing to do whatever it took to protect himself. As the victims took the stand to share their harrowing experiences, Dautro's reaction was nothing short of shocking. He sat stoically, showing no signs of remorse or empathy for the pain he had caused. Throughout his trial, Dautro displayed a complete lack of remorse and a shocking disregard for the consequences of his actions, even after his sentencing. As the sentencing hearing came to a close, Judge Pedro Jimenez addressed Dautro directly, calling him a manipulative monster who dragged his wife into a life of darkness. The judge's words reflected the gravity of Dautro's actions and the impact they had on those around him. Middlesex County Prosecutor Andrew Carey praised the sentence, stating that they had successfully removed a cancerous police officer from the Edison police force. Marcus Eberhardt. In a trial that has garnered significant attention, 2 former East Point police officers, Howard Weems and Marcus Eberhardt, have been charged with murder. The prosecution alleges that these officers repeatedly used their tasers on Gregory Towns, ultimately resulting in his tragic death despite his pleas for assistance. After a thorough day of deliberations, the jury has just delivered their verdict, finding Marcus Eberhardt guilty on all charges and Howard Weems guilty on 4 of the 10 counts. Back in April of 2014, a domestic dispute call came in, and officers Eberhardt and Weems were dispatched to the scene. Little did they know that this seemingly routine call would spiral into a tragedy that would rock the community to its core. As the officers arrived at the scene, they were met with a chaotic and tense situation. Gregory Towns, a 24-year-old man, was involved in the dispute. Witnesses reported that Towns appeared agitated and distraught, but the officers remained calm and attempted to defuse the situation. According to the prosecution, as Eberhardt and Weems tried to apprehend Towns, he made a desperate attempt to flee. The officers quickly caught up to him and managed to handcuff him, but that's when things took a turn for the worse. Towns, visibly exhausted and struggling to catch his breath, pleaded with the officers, informing them that he couldn't stand and was in distress. Instead of providing the necessary medical attention or calling for assistance, the prosecution alleges that Eberhard and Weems made a shocking decision. They decided to use their tasers on Towns. The courtroom was left in disbelief as the prosecution presented evidence of the officers' actions. Witnesses testified that they heard Towns cry out in pain as the electric shocks coursed through his body. Despite his pleas for mercy, the officers continued to tase him, disregarding his deteriorating condition. The prosecution argued that Eberhard and Weems showed a complete disregard for human life, using excessive force when it was entirely unnecessary. They contend that the officers ignored Towns' pleas for help, ultimately leading to his untimely death. The defense, on the other hand, argued that Eberhard and Weems were simply following protocol and acting in self-defense. The trial lasted for weeks, with both sides presenting their evidence and calling witnesses to the stand. The jury, composed of 5 women and 7 men, carefully considered the facts and testimonies before reaching their verdict. After a day of intense deliberations, the jury delivered their shocking verdict. Marcus Eberhard has been found guilty on all charges, while Howard Weems has been found guilty on 4 of the 10 counts. Eberhard was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 30 years for the felony murder and aggravated assault charges. He has a concurrent sentence of 5 years for the violation of oath of office. Weems, on the other hand, was sentenced to 5 years in prison, with 18 months to serve on the involuntary manslaughter and reckless conduct charges. Weems had this to say: "I'm sorry that this incident happened. I'm sorry there is nothing I'll ever be able to say that will allow them to have forgiveness." Eberhard, however, did not show any reactions to the verdict or sentence. He remained calm and stoic, both in facial expression and other body language. Daniel Saylor. In January 2011, Daniel Saylor, the esteemed police chief of Windermere, was arrested, sending ripples through the tight-knit community. The accusations against Saylor were nothing short of horrifying. He stood accused of covering up allegations of child sexual abuse against his close friend, Scott Frederick Bush. Windermere's police chief, Daniel Saylor, has been arrested on charges of misconduct and obstruction of justice. The allegations involve his alleged involvement in covering up sexual abuse allegations against Scott Frederick Bush, a prominent member of the community. This scandal left residents stunned and questioning the integrity of their police department. The arrest of a high-ranking law enforcement official sent shockwaves through the community. Many had placed their trust in Saylor to protect and serve, but now they were left questioning his true motives. As the news spread, whispers of corruption and abuse of power began to circulate. The allegations against Saylor were not taken lightly. The Florida Department of Law Enforcement launched a thorough investigation into the claims, determined to uncover the truth. As the investigation unfolded, more disturbing details emerged, painting a picture of a man who had abused his position of power. The prosecution stated that they believed that Chief Saylor not only failed to properly investigate the allegations against Mr. Bush, but actively worked to cover them up. They wasted no time in presenting evidence that would leave the jury stunned. Witnesses took the stand, recounting conversations they had with Saylor, revealing his alleged attempts to downplay the seriousness of the allegations against Bush. There were accounts of Chief Saylor saying that the allegations against Mr. Bush were baseless and that there was no need for further investigation. His dismissive attitude towards such serious accusations had left the witnesses shocked, to say the least. Former Chief Saylor had been quoted explicitly mentioning that he had received recommendations from outside agencies not to pursue charges against Mr. Bush. It seemed like he was trying to protect his friend at all costs. The defense, led by attorney William McClellan, attempted to cast doubt on the prosecution's case, arguing that Saylor was simply acting on the information he had been given by his officers, claiming that he had no reason to believe that there was any wrongdoing on the part of Mr. Bush. He tried to paint a picture where Saylor, too, was a victim of deception. However, the prosecution was quick to counter these claims, highlighting inconsistencies in Saylor's own testimony during the trial. The prosecution stated that Chief Saylor took the stand and knowingly lied to protect his friend, that he undermined the credibility of the victims and obstructed justice, a betrayal of the very oath he took to uphold the law. After weeks of intense courtroom drama, the jury deliberated for just over an hour before reaching their verdict on the charge of perjury in an official capital proceeding. The judge wasted no time in delivering the sentence. Saylor was sentenced to 8 years in state prison, marking the end of his once respected career. Saylor begged for mercy with a trembling voice, claiming that he believed his initial words to be true and had served his country for many years, but his plea for mercy fell on deaf ears as he was led away in handcuffs. Aaron Dean. It was a quiet evening on October 12, 2019, in Fort Worth, Texas, when tragedy struck. Tatiana Jefferson, a 28-year-old black woman, was at home with her 8-year-old nephew, Zion, enjoying a night of video games. Little did they know that their lives were about to be shattered. Around 2:30 a.m., a non-emergency call was made to the police, reporting an open door at Jefferson's residence. Responding to the call, Aaron Dean, accompanied by another officer, arrived at the scene. Instead of parking near the home and following proper protocol, Dean approached the house without announcing his presence as a police officer. Inside the home, Jefferson heard noises outside and became suspicious. She suspected a potential burglary and decided to take matters into her own hands. Retrieving her gun, she cautiously approached the window, unaware of the danger that awaited her. As Dean peered through an open door, he observed the messiness inside the home and immediately assumed a burglary was in progress. In a matter of seconds, their lives took a horrifying turn. Dean, failing to announce his presence or give any warning, shouted, "Put your hands up, show me your hands," before firing a single shot through the window. The bullet struck Jefferson, instantly ending her life and forever traumatizing Zion, who witnessed the horrific scene unfold before his young eyes. The forensics video expert later testified that there was only half a second between Dean's commands and the fatal shot. It was a split second that changed everything, leaving a family shattered and a community outraged. The aftermath of the shooting was filled with shock and disbelief. Dean, realizing the gravity of his actions, resigned from the police department before his arrest. Fort Worth Chief of Police Ed Kraus revealed that Dean was on the verge of being fired for allegedly violating multiple department policies, but the damage had already been done. As news of the tragic incident spread, the community demanded answers and justice for Tatiana Jefferson. The case garnered national attention, shining a spotlight on the issue of police brutality and the need for accountability within law enforcement. Dean's defense team argued that he believed he was facing deadly force when he saw Jefferson with a gun, justifying his use of deadly force in response. However, even Dean himself admitted on the stand that his actions constituted bad police work. The jury, after approximately 13 hours of deliberation, decided to convict Dean of manslaughter, a second-degree felony under the Texas Penal Code. The shocking verdict left many questioning the justice system and the value placed on black lives. The prosecution and defense rested their cases in the sentencing phase, with the jury ultimately delivering a sentence of over 11 years in prison for Aaron Dean. Ashley Carr, Jefferson's sister, subsequently delivered a powerful victim impact statement expressing her profound loss and the injustice of her sister's untimely death. Carr declared that her sister did not do anything wrong, yet she was murdered right in her own home. Carr's words resonated with the courtroom, her voice filled with pain and frustration. She continued, "I pity your ignorance. You do not know enough to be ashamed. You're not self-aware enough to understand your responsibility for this evil act." As Carr spoke, Dean sat in silence, his face betraying no emotion. Aaron Russell. Former Sheriff's Deputy Aaron Russell, aged 25, pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter in the shooting death of Nicholas Bills, aged 36. The incident occurred on May 1, 2020, when Bills was arrested by a state park ranger in San Diego's Old Town. Little did anyone know that this routine arrest would take a devastating turn. On that fateful day, Bills found himself in the back seat of the park ranger's car, en route to the downtown jail. But as they arrived at the facility, chaos ensued. Bills managed to slip out of the back seat and sprinted north on Front Street, desperate to escape the clutches of the law. Surveillance footage captured the heart-stopping moment when Aaron Russell, who happened to be on his way to work at the jail, witnessed Bill's escape. In a matter of seconds, Russell made a split-second decision that would change the course of both their lives forever. Russell, armed with his department-issued firearm, fired 5 shots at Bills, striking him 4 times. One bullet pierced the left side of Bill's back, sealing his tragic fate. The shocking footage played during Russell's preliminary hearing in San Diego Superior Court, leaving those in the courtroom and the nation at large in disbelief. The shooting marked a significant moment in San Diego County's history, as it was the first time a law enforcement officer had been charged with murder in the shooting death of a suspect. However, as the case unfolded, Russell's charge was reduced to voluntary manslaughter, a decision that would soon ignite a firestorm of controversy. In January of 2022, Aaron Russell entered a guilty plea, admitting that he unreasonably believed that he or someone else was in imminent danger of being killed or suffering great bodily injury when he saw Bills running from the jail. Russell acknowledged that he made a grave miscalculation and that his immediate use of deadly force was unnecessary, but his attorney, Michael Begovich, argued that Russell reacted in good faith, pointing to perceived danger cues that no one else noticed. Begovich suggested that a silver handcuff dangling from Bills' wrist could have been mistaken for a gun, leading Russell to believe that immediate use of deadly force was necessary. He said that Aaron Russell reacted to the situation presented to him in an incident that lasted a mere 12 seconds, responding responding to what he believed to be a genuine threat. The courtroom drama intensified as the judge weighed the options for sentencing. The prosecution sought a 6-year prison term, while the defense argued for probation, emphasizing Russell's young age, lack of criminal background, and absence of malicious intent. In the end, the judge decided to impose a 3-year suspended sentence as a condition of probation. This means that if Russell were to violate any of the terms, he could face imprisonment. The judge justified this decision by highlighting Russell's youth, lack of training, and absence of criminal history. Tearfully remorseful, Russell said this to Bill's family: "I am still haunted by the events of May 1st, 2020. The what-ifs consume my thoughts every day. I can only speak from my heart when I say that I am deeply sorry for your loss. I am sorry for the grief and pain that I have caused you." Eric Canary. In a shocking turn of events, former Kansas City police detective Eric Canary finds himself at the center of a high-profile trial as he is tried for murder. The case revolves around the fatal shooting of 26-year-old Cameron Lamb, a black man who was backing a pickup truck into a garage. The incident, which took place on December 3, 2019, has ignited a national conversation about police conduct and racial bias in law enforcement. The events that unfolded on that fateful day in December 2019 began with a report of a stolen pickup truck and a domestic dispute. Eric Canary, a former Kansas City police detective, and his partner Troy Schwalm were assigned to investigate the incident involving Cameron Lamb, a 26-year-old black man. It all started when Lamb's girlfriend reported that he had chased her in the stolen pickup truck. Concerned for her safety, the police were determined to apprehend Lamb and bring him to justice. Canary and Schwalm, dressed in plain clothes, followed Lamb's movements, tracking him to his property. As they arrived at the scene, tensions were high. The detectives approached Lamb, who was backing his pickup truck into a garage. It was at this moment that the situation took a deadly turn. According to Canary's testimony during the trial, Lamb pointed a gun at Schwalm, leaving the former detective with no choice but to open fire. In a split-second decision, Canary fired his weapon, fatally shooting Lamb. The sound of gunshots shattered the calm of the neighborhood, leaving witnesses in shock and disbelief. The prosecution presented a compelling case, arguing that Canary's actions were unjustified and violated Lamb's constitutional rights. They emphasized that the detectives had no probable cause to believe Lamb had committed a crime, no warrant for his arrest, and no search warrant or consent to be on his property. The prosecution also alleged that the gun found near Lamb's truck was planted and that the crime scene was staged. The defense, led by attorney Molly Hastings, sought to portray Canary as a dedicated officer who made a split-second decision to protect his partner's life. They argued that Lamb posed a threat by pointing a gun at Schwalm, leaving Canary with no choice but to use deadly force. The defense presented testimony from family, friends, and former colleagues, painting a picture of Canary as an exemplary officer with an outstanding career. Finally, after weeks of intense proceedings, the moment of truth arrived as Judge J. Dale Youngs delivered his verdict. In a surprising turn of events, Judge Youngs convicted Canary of second-degree involuntary manslaughter and armed criminal action. The sentencing hearing took place shortly after the verdict. Prosecutors recommended a 9-year prison sentence for Canary, emphasizing the gravity of the charges and the need for accountability. The defense, however, argued for a more lenient sentence, highlighting Canary's exemplary life and career. Judge Youngs sentenced Canary to 6 years in prison. The sentence included 3 years for involuntary manslaughter and 6 years for armed criminal action to be served concurrently. The judge's ruling left many feeling that justice had not been fully served, while others saw it as a step in the right direction. Canary sat still, his face betraying a mix of emotions, sadness, and perhaps remorse as the sentence was read out. Craig Pyer. Kara Knott, a promising student at San Diego State University, disappeared while driving from her boyfriend's home in Escondido, California, to her parents' house in El Cajon. The following day, her car was discovered on a dead-end road at the Mercy Road off-ramp from I-15 in San Diego County. It was a horrifying discovery that would lead investigators down a twisted path of deceit and betrayal. The man responsible for Kara's untimely demise was none other than Craig Pyer, a police officer and 13-year veteran of the California Highway Patrol. Pyer's trial would reveal a shocking pattern of predatory behavior and abuse of power as he targeted women along the interstate and made sinister advances towards them. But it was Kara Knott who paid the ultimate price for his dark desires on the night of December 27, 1986. Pyer, on duty in a marked CHP patrol car, directed Kara to pull off the freeway on an isolated, unfinished off-ramp. It was a trap, carefully orchestrated by a man who had been targeting women along the interstate for his sinister desires. In a desperate act of self-defense, Kara fought back. She slashed and scratched slashed at Pyre's face, leaving visible marks of her resistance. But Pyre's rage knew no bounds. In a fit of violent fury, he bludgeoned her with his flashlight, and when that wasn't enough, he resorted to the ultimate act of brutality, strangulation. Kara's life was cruelly snuffed out by the hands of a man who had sworn an oath to protect and uphold the law. Her body, now lifeless, was callously discarded over the edge of an abandoned bridge, where it would remain hidden from the world. The darkness of that night concealed the heinous crime that had taken place, but little did Pyre know that his actions would not go unnoticed. The wheels of justice were set in motion, and the search for Kara Knott began. Forensic analysis of the rope found in Pyre's patrol car matched the rope marks around Kara's neck, linking him to the crime, and a distinctive gold rayon fiber found on Kara's dress was traced back to a shoulder patch worn by Pyre on his CHP uniform. The tire tracks on the bridge where Kara's body was discovered showed signs of a hasty exit, leaving black marks on the pavement, and a drop of blood found on one of Kara's boots was consistent with Pyre's blood type and other genetic markers. The evidence was mounting, painting a damning picture of a man who had betrayed the trust placed in him. The trial that followed was a harrowing journey into the depths of a depraved mind. The first trial resulted in a hung jury, but upon retrial, Pyre was found guilty of murder, marking the first conviction of murder by an on-duty CHP officer. On August 4th, 1988, he was sentenced to 25 years to life, a small measure of justice for the life he had taken. Throughout the proceedings, Pyre showed little emotion, seemingly detached from the gravity of the situation. It was as if he believed he could escape the consequences of his actions. Pyre continued to claim his innocence, refusing to provide a DNA sample that could potentially exonerate him. Thanks to the long arm of the law, the end was not in his favor. It's funny how these cops didn't expect to get harsh sentences despite their disregard for the law. If you enjoyed this video, you should enjoy the ones on your screen. Click and find out.